Hey guys, welcome back to the garage, and today I'm going to go over some of the progress that we've made on the 94 Honda Civic Hatchback. Alright guys, so when working on a car or a project that's as in-depth as this, particularly when you're talking about wiring or rewiring a car, there's a lot of prep and research and planning that you can put in, even behind the scenes, or in this case behind the camera, that doesn't necessarily get seen by people, whether it's at a show or your friends, or in this case on YouTube. So I just wanted to take a moment and make a video and go over some of the stuff that I do behind the scenes that helps me get ready for the wiring mess that I'm about to deal with, and what I'm going to do moving forward, as well as some of the stuff that I've done to prep the car, what's next, and how we proceed with this build. Alright guys, so we can start here in the interior of the car. As you've seen in some of my other videos, I already stripped a lot of the interior. I pulled out the dash, I did all of that. So now I went a little bit further. I removed the blower motor housing and the evaporator for the AC unit housing, and that basically has given me room to access all of these wires, most of which run through to the engine harness, which is this right here, or a chunk of this is. There's a few other ones that go as well. And basically, I'm gonna clean all this up. I'll go into more detail in a minute, but basically I just wanted to show you some of the prep. All right, so here we are on the driver's side. You can see the steering wheel over here. The fuse box has been moved down. That just gives me a lot of access to everything from clutch and brake pedals, sensors, bundles of wires that run through. So there is a bundle of wires that runs through to the engine bay from this side, as well as the passenger side. And basically a lot of this stuff is just prep work to get everything opened up and let me view and see and modify as needed. So just wanted to give you a quick overview of this. Let's move into the engine bay and see what else I've done there. Alright guys, so welcome back to the engine bay. As you can see, everything is starting to get stripped out. I've started removing fuel components. You can see these fuel lines are going to come out as well. All the brake lines are going to get removed and replaced with braided steel. Same with the fuel lines. Going to remove the master cylinders for the clutch and brakes, as well as the brake booster. I haven't decided yet what I'm going to do with the subframe. The subframe, I think I'm going to remove it. I want to pick the car up a little higher so I can remove the wheels, the suspension, the subframe, basically get everything stripped down to where I need it to be and where I want it to be. Then I can basically start over, figure out where I want to mount everything as far as wires, throttle cables, patch up any holes, sand things down that I'm not going to use anymore, and go from there. So basically it's just one step at a time, just trying to get as much removed from the car as possible without removing things that I'll end up just having to put back in. Anything I remove, I want to either replace or refinish and go from there. So the next thing I want to do is get the cowl off. Like I said, the rest of these cylinders, the rest of these lines are going to go. They're all going to get replaced, and we'll go from there. Alright guys, so when it comes to my engine harness, I've done maybe one of the craziest things that you could possibly do with it, and that is to cut the whole thing up. And by that I mean I took everything and I broke it down into either a sub harness like this. I'm going to call this my fuel sub harness, because basically it's my 4 fuel injectors and my intake air temperature. So what that is you got your 4 connectors, runs out the pigtails here, and basically from that I can go through and I can check to see what all the actual connections are. Where does each individual wire actually run to? Does it run from, let's say, my map sensor to a firewall connector, or does it run to another sensor, or is it spliced in somewhere? You know, which grounds are actually grounds and stuff like that. So it is a little crazy, it is a little chaotic, but for me, I think it works because I just wanted to see, you know, really let me pull back the loom and really see where all these wires went. That brings me into my next point of, there's a lot of prep that can be done and a lot of research so that I already kind of knew where things went. So I can pull a sensor out and be like, oh, I think this is such and such sensor. Even though I don't have the sensors here, I just have the connectors. So each connector has a number, each sensor, however you want to do it. And you kind of know that it goes from maybe sensor A or connector A to connector B, or even sensor B, and you know where each wire goes. So that helps me make a map, and that's kind of where a lot of these Excel spreadsheets come in. I've made a bunch of Excel spreadsheets, and they help me map out all of the connections and all of the wires and where they go and where they end up and which wires are the same and which wires are spliced together and which wires aren't and how many of them have common wires. There's a few sections where there's a common wire that either does 5 volts or it's a system ground or it's a true ground or whatever it is. So it helped me really kind of see for the first time where a lot of these wires actually went, instead of just hypothetically tracing them through schematic on a factory service manual. So it is crazy. It's kind of a big step. It's definitely a step of no return, but it helped me really see the engine harness for what it is. And hopefully with all the information that I've put together and what I've done, I'll be able to move forward and build a better engine harness, and one that better suits my needs and does exactly what I want it to do. I'll be able to minimize anything that I don't have. I think there was 1 or 2 extra connectors that I don't have. I also want to go through a lot of the AC stuff, since I am putting the AC back in, since I know I've mentioned that already, but it's going to be a big project. And this is, like I said, we're really not even at the point of rebuilding the car yet. We're still in deconstruction, we're still in planning, and I've already done a lot of work, and in some cases maybe more work than a lot of people do their cars ever. So a lot of this stuff I've already done, so a lot of it was redoing stuff that I had already did, and I'm hoping that in the future when this comes out and when it's finished, it'll just be better for it. So going back to those Excel spreadsheets, I basically wanted to touch on figuring out how many conductors I actually had and how many wires I needed. So it came out to about 40 18 to 20 gauge and a handful of 14 gauge and some larger gauge wires, which made me select this single 47 position connector, which I'll use for most of my signal wires, and those 2 different sizes, which will require the 2 different tools, which I did pick up as well as a selection of different colored wiring. So I did decide to go with a PVC jacket, which is more traditional, versus originally I was thinking maybe a silicone, which might be too big. I also picked up some looming material, which will help insulate and protect the harness, as well as some shielding sleeve, which will help protect some of those sensitive signals for the distributor. I also got some general use heat shrink, which will help for building the harness as well as doing some of the wiring, and some colored heat shrink that I can use primarily for labeling. Alright guys, well I think that's pretty much going to wrap up this video. Hopefully it sheds a little light on at least my own process when it comes to the prep and research and planning and documentation and all of those fun things that I know nobody loves to do, but they are helpful in the long run. When it becomes time to troubleshoot this thing and finally get it running, it'll be nice to have all this documentation and know exactly which sensor and where it goes and how it's connected. So drop me a comment if you have anything. Hopefully you found this enjoyable or entertaining or at least informative. But other than that, don't forget to like, share, subscribe, and we'll catch you in the next video.